Okay, so imagine this. You're sitting in a packed lecture hall, right? Students from all over the world, and you're totally following along, participating even. No problem.
Wow, that's the dream, isn't it?
Totally. And it's all about mastering English, especially if you're headed to a global university. That's what today's deep dive is all about.
Awesome.
We've got this podcast, Mastering English for Global University Success, and, well, it's amazing.
Yeah, I was really impressed. It's easy to forget how important fluency is in school. I mean, beyond just getting accepted, it's about actually succeeding.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the key to unlocking everything. And one thing that really jumped out at me listening to this podcast was daily immersion.
Oh, yeah, creating that English-speaking bubble around you.
Yeah.
Even if you're not, like, living in an English-speaking country.
Right. Exactly. But it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. They talk about, like, easy ways to fit English into your day, listening to podcasts while you're commuting or watching movies with English subtitles.
The subtitles, that's so smart.
I know, right? You can start with subtitles in your own language and then slowly switch to English.
It's like training your brain without even realizing it. Connecting the spoken word with the written word.
Totally. And speaking of training, they don't shy away from speaking practice, which can be, well, kind of terrifying for some people.
Totally get that. But they have some really cool ideas, like using language exchange apps. Have you ever tried those?
Oh, yeah, like Tandem or HelloTalk.
Those are the ones. You connect with native English speakers who want to learn your language.
It's brilliant. You both help each other. Win-win.
Totally. And it makes it more fun. You're connecting with real people.
So important. But, beyond speaking, they also talk a lot about reading. And not just, like, textbooks.
Ah, yes. Reading for pleasure. Articles, novels, even blogs.
Anything that grabs your attention, right?
Exactly. And it really helps you build your vocabulary and grammar skills. You're kind of soaking it all up naturally.
And it preps you for all that academic reading you'll be doing at uni. Research papers, journal articles.
It won't feel so intimidating anymore.
Right. And they even suggest using e-readers, so you can instantly look up words you don't know.
No more lugging around those giant dictionaries.
It's like having a built-in tutor right there on your screen. Makes it so much easier.
Now, here's something we often forget about. Flashcards.
Flashcards. I thought those were just for, like, basic vocab.
Nope. The podcast talks about how they can be super powerful if you use them right, that is. They recommend apps like Anki and Quizlet.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. They use this thing called spaced repetition, right?
That's it. But the key is, don't just memorize definitions. You got to actually use the words.
Ah, like in real sentences and stuff. Got it.
Exactly. Make sentences, write little paragraphs, even try slipping them into conversations.
That's how you make it stick. Makes sense. And that brings us to writing, I guess, because they really stress writing practice.
Oh, yeah. Even if it's just a quick journal entry or like a social media post.
It doesn't have to be a novel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the act of writing, it forces you to think in English, which helps you solidify those grammar rules.
It's like exercise, but for your English brain.
And speaking of exercise, consistency is key.
Right. A little bit every day is better than a huge cram session once a month.
And they also suggest getting feedback on your writing from native speakers. You can find people online who will help you.
Oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
It's really helpful. They could point out things you might not even notice yourself.
Like a fresh perspective. Okay, so we've covered reading, writing. What about grammar?
Ah, grammar. The podcast has a really good approach to that, actually. Learning in context, not just memorizing rules.
Makes sense. Like seeing it in action.
Exactly. Pay attention to how grammar is used in real life. The books you read, podcasts you listen to, even everyday conversations.
So it's more about patterns than, like, strict rules.
Exactly. And there's some really great resources out there to help. Websites like Grammarly or the Cambridge English website, they have explanations, examples, even interactive exercises.
That sounds way more fun than those old grammar textbooks.
Way more. So reading, writing, grammar. Are we forgetting anything?
I think we're missing a big one. Listening.
You're right. The podcast talks about actively improving your listening skills.
I guess that means more than just, passively hearing stuff in the background.
Exactly. They suggest regularly listening to things like podcasts, TED Talks, even news broadcasts in English.
Okay, but that sounds kind of boring.
Not if you pick topics that you're actually interested in. It shouldn't feel like a chore.
That's a good point. If it's something you enjoy, it won't feel like work.
Right. And don't worry if you don't understand everything at first, especially if the speech is fast or the accent is unfamiliar.
It's normal to feel lost sometimes.
Totally normal. They suggest adjusting the playback speed, listening to the same thing multiple times, or even using transcripts to follow along.
Oh, those are good tips. I've definitely tried the playback speed trick before.
It really helps, and you'll be surprised how much you pick up with each listen. It's like training your ears.
And that's crucial for uni, right? Being able to follow lectures and discussions.
Absolutely. And you know what else the podcast dives into?
Yeah.
The world of language learning apps.
Oh, yeah, like Duolingo and Babbel. Those are pretty popular, right?
They are. And there's Memrise, too. They all offer structured lessons, and they make learning feel like a game.
I've tried those. They're pretty fun, actually.
They are. And it's like having your own personal English tutor right there in your pocket.
And you can learn at your own pace, on your own time. It's super flexible.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big takeaway, goal setting. The podcast talks about how important it is to set specific goals to stay motivated.
So not just saying, I want to improve my English.
Right. It should be something more concrete,
Yeah.
like learning 10 new words every week or writing a short paragraph every day.
Yeah, break it down into smaller chunks makes it less overwhelming.
Exactly. And those little wins, those little signs of progress, they really keep you going. It's like reaching milestones on a map.
It's all about that sense of accomplishment, right?
Exactly. It keeps you motivated to keep moving forward toward that ultimate goal, fluency.
Love it. Okay, so we've got all these amazing strategies, but sometimes you need a little extra help, right?
Absolutely. And the podcast talks about the benefits of seeking personalized guidance, whether that's online courses, in-person classes, or working one-on-one with a tutor.
Oh, a tutor. That's a great idea.
Imagine having a dedicated expert right there with you, giving you feedback, pinpointing your weaknesses, and creating a learning plan just for you.
That would be amazing, like a personal trainer, but for your English skills.
Exactly. They can help you reach your full potential. But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to digest all this.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, and we've only just scratched the surface of this podcast.
There's so much more to explore.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty of mastering English for global university success, right?
Yeah, it's packed with good stuff. Last time, remember, we talked about immersion, language exchange apps, those kinds of things. Oh, and flashcards. Don't forget the flashcard.
Right. And using reading and writing to really cement those skills. But this podcast, it goes even deeper, like into how everyone learns differently.
Personalized learning, right? It makes so much sense.
It does. And they suggest all sorts of things, like online courses or classes in person, even working one-on-one with a tutor.
A tutor. That could be so helpful, couldn't it?
I think so. Like having someone who gets you, you know.
Totally. They can give you that individual feedback.
Yeah.
Figure out what you need to work on. Create like a customized plan.
Exactly. It's like, what's that word? Bespoke.
Bespoke learning. I like that.
And this kind of guidance, super helpful for tougher stuff like academic writing or prepping for those big exams like the TOEFL or IELTS.
Ugh, those exams. But yeah, having a tutor could make a huge difference.
Speaking of making a difference, remember goal setting. We touched on it last time, but it's so important.
It is. It's easy to just say, okay, I want to get better at English, but
But that's too vague.
exactly. The podcast really emphasizes making those goals specific, achievable.
So instead of just improve, it's like, I'm going to learn 10 new grammar structures this week.
Yes. Or I'll write one practice essay every 3 days. Something like
It's
that.
like breaking a marathon into little sprints. That's
Right.
it.
Love that analogy. And you know what else helps with those little sprints? Those language exchange apps.
Oh, yeah. We talked about Tandem and HelloTalk,
Yeah.
but they're worth mentioning again.
Definitely. They're such a cool way to practice speaking, you know?
Yeah, without feeling like you're being judged or anything.
Exactly. Plus, you're connecting with people from different cultures.
And maybe even making new friends, which is like the whole point of language, right?
Connecting with others,
Okay.
absolutely. But if apps aren't your thing, the structured learning apps are great too.
Duolingo, Babbel.
Mm-hmm. And Memrise, they've gotten really good.
I've used them. It's kind of addictive, actually.
The gamification thing, right. It makes it fun.
It does. It's like, ooh, I just leveled up my English.
Exactly. And don't forget all the free stuff online too.
Oh, yeah. Like the Cambridge English Dictionary. Or Grammarly.
Super useful. And for listening practice, well, we've got to plug podcasts again, right?
Of course. And TED Talks. Even news in English. Anything that keeps you engaged.
But choose stuff you like.
Right.
If it's boring, you won't stick with it.
Totally. It's like turning your commute into study time, but enjoyable study time.
Right. Sneaky learning. But, beyond actively studying, there's this whole passive side to it too.
Passive? What do you mean?
Like surrounding yourself with English, even when you're not really focused on learning.
Interesting. So like what? Watching movies in English.
Exactly. TV shows, music, even social media. Anything in English.
Huh. I never thought of it that way.
It's about creating that English-speaking environment.
Yeah.
Even if it's just in your own head.
And that actually makes a difference.
It does. It's like, remember how we learned our first language? Just by hearing it all the time?
Oh, right. It just kind of seeps in.
Exactly. Passive immersion kind of recreates that.
So it's like active learning builds the skills, and then passive immersion helps them stick.
Something like that, yeah. Like two sides of the same coin.
I like that. Two sides of the same coin.
It's like training for a marathon, right? You wouldn't just sit on the couch and hope for the best.
You got to put in the work, the active training.
Exactly. But you also need rest, recovery time.
So your body can absorb all that training. Makes sense.
Same with language. Active learning is the hard work, and passive immersion is the recovery.
It's like building a house. You need the structure, the foundation, the active learning part.
Right. And then you need the finishing touches, the paint, the furniture.
Yeah.
The passive stuff that makes it feel like home.
Okay, that's a good analogy. So it's all about finding that balance, active and passive.
Exactly. And, speaking of homes, that reminds me of this documentary I saw recently.
Hold on. Before we get sidetracked by documentaries.
Oh, right. Sorry, got carried away.
We've covered a ton in this part.
We have. Personalized learning, goal setting, those apps.
And don't forget passive immersion. It's all connected.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, there's still so much more to unpack from this podcast.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. It's been a wild ride through mastering English for global university success, hasn't it?
It really has. So many great tips and strategies, and we're not done yet.
Nope, not even close. But as we wrap things up, I want to talk about something the podcast emphasizes a lot. Making mistakes.
Oh, yeah, that's huge EE. They really drive home the point that mistakes aren't like failures.
More like stepping stones, right?
Exactly. They're part of the process. You learn from them. It's like, imagine learning to ride a bike.
Oh, I get it. You're going to fall a few times before you figure it out.
Right. But each time you fall, you learn something. Maybe you learn to, pedal slower or use the brakes more.
Or wear a helmet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same with English. Don't be afraid to try new things, new words, new phrases, even if you mess up.
Yeah, it's all about practice, right?
Exactly. The more you put yourself out there, the more you learn.
And remember those language exchange apps we talked about?
Perfect for practicing without feeling self-conscious.
Yeah. Your partner's probably making mistakes in your language, too. You can both laugh about it.
Totally. It's all about supporting each other. And you know what else is important?
What's that?
Celebrating your progress. Even the small stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to get discouraged, right? Like if you're not fluent overnight.
Totally. But the podcast reminds us that every step counts. Every new word, every conversation, every little bit of progress, it's all worth celebrating.
It's like climbing a mountain, right? You don't just focus on the summit.
You enjoy the view along the way.
Exactly. Every step you take, it gets you closer to the top. And it feels good to recognize that.
Totally.
Right.
It keeps you motivated to keep going. Okay, so we're almost at the top of our mountain here, our deep dive.
Almost there.
And I want to leave you with this. The podcast really stresses that there's no one right way to learn English.
Find what works for you, right?
Exactly. Experiment. Try different things. Discover what clicks. Create your own path to fluency.
And like all the stuff we've talked about, it's like a toolbox.
Ooh, I like that. A toolbox. You get to pick and choose the tools you need.
And build something amazing.
Exactly. And remember, fluency isn't a finish line. It's a journey. It's ongoing.
Always room to grow and learn.
Absolutely. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the wins, and never stop exploring English. Who knows where it'll take you?
That's such a great note to end on.
It is, isn't it? So to our listener, as you start your own English adventure, remember, you got this. You have the power to reach your goals.
This podcast, Mastering English for Global University Success, it's a great starting point.
It is, packed with motivation and practical advice. And who knows, maybe someday you'll be that person in the lecture hall confidently participating in English.
That's the dream. And hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring this podcast with us. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.